Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Alice and I'm doing videos documenting my minimalist journey, and I'm trying to do that in a more sustainable and realistic ways. And in today's video I want to share with you 5 questions that I always ask myself before buying anything new. In this channel we are all about being very intentional and being very conscious with every purchase we make and very savvy with our money. So I think that asking yourself these 5 questions before buying something will really help you to understand if that something is really a need or just a want. So let's get into it. The number one question for me is always, can I use that items at least 10 times in a year? Now, this for me substitutes a more general question, do you really need that item? Because I find that question to be honestly too vague, and I find that it's very easy for us to find excuses and justification and to really trick ourselves into believing that we actually needed items when this is not really the case. So by asking myself how many times can I actually use that items, or in how many different ways can I use it, it's really helpful and more precise. So the way in which I do it is when I have the eye on something, normally I wait around about a year, and in that year I try to write down every single time that I think, oh, I wish I had that item with me. And if it is at least 10 times, better if even more, then it might make sense to actually buy it. If you don't want to wait a year, I understand it, but I would recommend to wait a good few months, because a lot of time when we see something right after, we can think at tons of ways in which we can use it, but then if we let enough time passing, we kind of forget about this item altogether. So leave enough time to realize if it is something that you really feel the need for on a recurrent basis, or if it is just like that few times because you just saw it. My second question is, do I already have something that might do the same job? Now, we've been convinced by shops and adverts that we need one item per every single purpose or occasions. But in reality, I would say the majority of our items are way more versatile than we ever expect them to be. So by doing the mental gymnastic of always try to see if there is something else in my home that can serve the same purpose, really saved me a lot of money in the long run, because in a very big amount of situations the answer was yes. And it also had the double perks of sometimes making me re-fall in love with an item because I found a different and unexpected way of reusing it. So for example, since I started to become more minimalist, for me it became super important to have everything nice and tidy, even inside my drawers and cabinets, while before it was an absolute chaos and mess. So I really considered buying a lot of organizers to serve that purpose, until I realized that I had a lot of other containers lying around that I could use in the same way. So no organizers for me. Before going ahead with the question though, this is the moment in which I remind you, please remember to subscribe to my channel and to like this video if you're liking it so far. It is super important for my channel. It's a very small one, so it would be very important for me, and I really would love to have you back. So enough with the rambling, let's get back to the video. Number 3 is, where do I put it? Now, for sure, this is very important for me because I live in a smaller house, but I think it should be very important even if you're living in a massive house with a lot of space. Because honestly, this is how we clutter our home. So we always buy things taking for granted that we will find a space for it. And then we arrive home and we realize that we don't have as much space as we thought we had, and either we had the items lying around and cluttering our spaces, or we have to buy extra storage for it. So now I rather play in advance, and when I'm considering buying something, I am already considering where do I put it. And if I see that I don't really have the space for it, I would seriously think it twice. And this is the reason why I still don't have a blender, despite the fact that the amount of times in which I thought I want a blender that would be perfect is countless, and I am absolutely sure that if I had one, I would use it tons. But still, a blender is not an absolute necessity, and I do not have a space to put it, so for the moment I'll do without it. Number 4 is, do I need extra items to make that one item work? Now, this is something that I've seen a lot of time when we talk about clothes, because I think a lot of people had the experience of buying something because they really loved it, and then when they arrived home, they discovered that it didn't make any sense with the rest of the wardrobe, and I had to buy extra items to make that one item work. And I was absolutely guilty of doing that, and now I really learned to start thinking ahead, and if I see that that item doesn't really work with the rest of my wardrobe, it's a strong no for me. But honestly, this works also outside the wardrobe situation. There are plenty of items that actually requires extra gadgets and things just to be able to work. So for example, when I bought my camera, to really be able to use it as I wanted it, I also had to buy a tripod, a couple of lights, and a couple of extra batteries. So it did require extra items. Of course, in that case, for me, it made sense, but there are instances in which it doesn't. Again, going back to the blender situation, in that case, I decided that buying an extra storage just for the blender was not worth it for me. And then number 5 is what do I do with the items once I'm finished doing it? Now, this question actually is the result of 2 different experiences. So first of all, of course, as someone who's trying to live a little bit more sustainably, it becomes very important to consider what happens to items after I stopped using them. And so, of course, I do try to prioritize items that can be easily be upcycled, repurposed, composted, or at max be recycled. But this also comes from my minimalist experiences, because honestly, decluttering is very fun and addictive, but dealing with what you declutter is really not as much fun, and it is very time consuming and energy consuming, and this is unfortunately something that we don't see a lot on the internet, but it is a harsh reality. So since I learned that, now I try to think ahead, and when I'm considering something, I do already try to think how easy it will be to dispose of that item responsibly once I'm finishing using it. Because if the answer is it will be extremely difficult, then I would think it twice, or at very least I would ensure that these are items that I absolutely cannot live without to be worth it, that extra effort in the end. So for example, this summer I finally decided to buy a pair of espadrilles. Honestly, I didn't really have a lot of requirements. I just wanted them to be dark color and with a platform that wasn't higher than 6 centimeters max. Let's be honest, espadrilles kind of all look the same, and even on the second-hand market, the cost is also more or less the same. So honestly, they were all virtually the same. And in deciding which one specifically to buy, I ended up choosing a pair of Castaner. And that was because I've seen that these ones are very sought after, so it is relatively easy to resell them compared to espadrilles from an absolute unknown brand. And because I had to guess on the size, then for me this was a safer bet. And then I also have kind of an extra question, that is, how is the item made? If I have to buy something new, for me, I want to ensure that it is sustainably and ethically made as much as possible. The reason why I put this question as a bonus question is, first of all, that I honestly ask this only when I'm buying something new and not second-hand, so this is really kind of an exceptional situation. And secondly, because I know that not everyone will be able to ask this question for every single items, because these items tend to be more expensive. So these were my 5+1 questions, and for sure the ideal items would answer to all of these questions. But let's be honest, it's not always possible, and sometimes it can actually make sense to be a little bit more flexible and to make exceptions to our own rules. So again, let's go back to the example of a camera. That was a break of one of the rules, but it did make sense to me. However, I found also that asking all of these questions every single time I want to buy something really helps me to understand when it does make sense to make an exception and when it doesn't. And let me tell you, in the majority of time, it doesn't. And this really saved me a lot of time and a lot of money in the long run, because I said no to a lot of items that I would have otherwise spent money on, and I would have spent the time on to try and basically find someone else who want to buy that item because it didn't work for me. The second kind of advantage was also that the few times in which I actually made an exception, generally speaking, I never really regret it, because it really made sense to make an exception. I have to say the camera was a tricky example here, because I talked about it in a different video and I explained why I consider that one of my worst buys as a minimalist, and I will link the video. But to be honest, the reason why I consider it a bad purchase was really nothing to do with the fact that I had to buy the extra items or with the fact that I had to buy a camera at all. It was more like this specific type of camera that was not the best for me. And that was really it for today. Thank you so much for watching as always, and until next time, stay safe and bye!